What is up, fellas? We are so back. We're back for season 2, episode 1 of the Gogertzone podcast. Connor Calzone, it is so wonderful to see you. How have you been, my friend?
I've been great. The haters said that we would not get a second season. That was a very good take to have, considering we made it about 5 episodes through season 1. But the haters are wrong.
They saw us come out with no live episodes in the actual season. They said there's no way they bring you back for the preseason season 2.
There's no way they're going to make episodes for just the preseason again.
It is so good to be back right now. I want to stand up at this desk for this whole episode because I'm so excited. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'm Ryan Gogerty. This is our co-host, Connor Calzone. That's the Gogertzone podcast, a terrible pun we came up with. Maybe ChatGPT came up with the name.
It's probably ChatGPT knowing how we do stuff.
I'm so excited to be back with you guys. Today we are going to get into all the things that you need to know to get yourself caught up to speed going into this year's fantasy draft. We are so excited to bring this episode to you. About a week ago, the fantasy podcast community started picking back up, started doing things like 2024 season recap, 2025 outlook, rookies to watch out for, things like that. And we just want to bring it all to you in one episode to start the season so that you can get your mind focused on the 2025 season ahead. We can't frickin' wait, Connor. It's so good.
I love when the fantasy football season comes back around. You start seeing on your For You page on Instagram in like the mid to late July. It's like, these are the 5 guys who are going to win you your fantasy football leagues this year. Or like, these are the 5 guys you should let your idiot league mates draft. I'm like, yes, I'm so excited for fantasy football to be back.
Dude, I was looking at some of these like early season projections, and I watched like ESPN do a mock draft and things like that, and I'm like, there's some guys up here on this list that I had no idea finished as strong as they did because you get towards the playoffs and you just forget about these people who just went off the last 3 weeks of the regular season during the fantasy playoffs, and now all of a sudden they're getting drafted in the first round. These guys that like Devon Achane is I think number 8 in the preseason rankings right now. It's just guys that like I would have never thought of if we hadn't gotten into it now, and that's what we're gonna get on into today. So Connor, how do you feel going into this fantasy season? Have you gotten a chance to look at the preseason rankings yet?
I have looked at the preseason rankings, and I think the interesting thing to start out, let's just go top bottom here, is I think there's a real case you could make for 5 players going 1-1 this season, and it being the first 5 guys if you look at ESPN's PPR rankings right now. This is assuming 12-team PPR because that is what the standard is. The Fantasy Focus podcast refuses to acknowledge that most people are in 12-team leagues, not 10-team leagues.
12-team mock draft. I don't know if it was today or yesterday.
Oh, they did. Okay.
They heard the comments. They heard the comments complaining like it's time to grow up. People do 12-team leagues.
Yeah.
But no judgment. Whatever you do, completely up to you. But,
right. Not important. But so in PPR rankings, Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson, Justin Jefferson, Saquon Barkley, and Jahmyr Gibbs. I've seen arguments for all 5 of those guys to go 1-1. I want to hear your take. Where is your ranking? Maybe not give me a 1 through 5, but maybe a tier 1, tier 2 out of those 5 guys. What are you thinking about it, the first overall pick, if you have it?
I want to get into. So we'll definitely be doing tier episodes. I think that's something that we'll have to get into. Something that the fantasy community's been talking about for a couple years now is how tiers is a more helpful way to think of players and where to draft them going into your fantasy drafts, because it kind of helps you separate where you see a significant gap in the potential ceiling, not necessarily the projections, if the projections are sort of close, but where you see a gap in the sort of potential ceiling. And that being said, like you say, there's a lot of guys that can make that case for 1-1 this year. I think after 2 years back-to-back of kind of getting bit at the 1-1 position, if you took Justin Jefferson last year, he was kind of the consensus number 1 overall. You got a little bit of injury, which obviously wasn't expected coming from him. He's not someone with an extensive injury history. I think the fantasy community with that and CMC having all these injuries, you see the 1-1s getting a little bit more cautious. Now, I've seen a lot of people say Jamar Chase kind of he's in a little bit of a league of his own this year. And I just want to point out that even though the projections are saying that he should be in sort of the 1-1 on his own tier, the argument I would make against that, nothing against Jamar Chase, is that what we see from people who have a career year that finished top of their position the year before, it's very rare that they repeat as the top in their position next year. Mm-hmm. Not to say it won't happen, but football is a very dynamic game. There's a lot of things that go on with it. And if you remember last year of episode 1, I wore my Saquon Barkley jersey to the podcast to announce that I had him as my number 1 overall running back. And I had to bring it up today because the amount of people that looked at me like I was insane going into that. And I was thinking, well, of course you're not going to say he's definitely going to be number 1, but why can't any of these guys? And it goes to your point. There are 5 guys on this list that all could potentially be the 1-1. And even in that tier 2, you look at people like Saquon Barkley, once again, who people are going to say the passing upside, or I guess the receiving upside isn't quite there just because of the offense. It wouldn't surprise any of us if he finished 1-1. There's a lot of guys like that. But that being said, we'll get into it all. We have 6 topics to get through in this introduction season recap episode. First thing we're going to do is we're going to recap the 2024 season, kind of hit the main highlights, what you missed, the key takeaways from last year. We're going to go into some early 2025 preseason rankings. We'll tell you a kind of surprising top 10 going into this year, but also go through some of the other rankings going into this year. Some offseason moves and team changes to know. Some rookies and sophomores to watch in 2025. Some people coming into the league that we expect to make a big impact right away, and even a first rounder that people are expecting to be a rookie impact right away. And then some final thoughts in the 2025 season outlook going into it. So, Connor, if you'd like to, I would like to rattle off a couple things that happened during the 2024 fantasy season and just get your kind of initial reaction and sort of what you thought of it coming out of last year.
Hit me with it.
Yeah, so first thing, Lamar Jackson finishing as the number 1 overall fantasy player with 430 PPR points, a new single season record for a QB. Didn't realize that was a single season record for a QB. I know he went off last year. I had to eat my pride in one of my keeper leagues, traded him away thinking that like the second half of the year was like going to be a wash, and it was like completely was wrong on that. And I'm not too upset because I got Jaden Daniels in that league and it's a keeper league, so I'm very, very happy as far as that's concerned. But 430 fantasy points is nothing to scoff at.
And
he scored 20 fantasy points in 14 games. In 14 games, tied for the most ever, and was the most common player on fantasy championship rosters. A common stat you see, things like Travis Kelce a few years ago was on like 50% of championship rosters. There's some players like that just make all the difference in the world. It's Todd Monken's offense. He had 41 passing touchdowns and 915 rush yards, made him the easy fantasy MVP. Lamar Jackson, do you have anyone sniffing at his heels going into the QB1 conversation this year?
So something I didn't realize before looking at it from kind of a broader lens is I was confident, just like the way the season went, that Josh Allen was QB1. I mean, he had that stretch, I think it was week 13 and 14 or 14 and 15, where he scored 90-something points in 2 weeks. He had that 51-point game, which was the most ever for a quarterback. It was one of the best fantasy performances, period, of all time. And he followed up with like another 40-piece. And I was like, I had Josh Allen in a few leagues. I got second place in a lot of leagues last year. Every single league that I was in, I got second place. Not first, not third, second. And Josh Allen was on 2 of those teams. I was like, oh my God, it's so nice being a Josh Allen owner. And I was looking at the quarterback rankings this year and seeing that there's a kind of 4-way tie at the top between Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Jalen Hurts. And I was so... What were you saying?
Josh Allen was 50 points behind by the end of the year.
Yeah. I mean, Josh Allen did sit out a game, so there's something to say there. But yeah, Lamar Jackson averaged 3 points per game more than the next closest guy. And I didn't even realize he had that kind of season. I think, like I said, there's a lot of elite quarterbacks in this year's fantasy, in this year's fantasy leagues. Lamar, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, and Jalen Hurts. It's going to be interesting to see kind of when the first person takes a quarterback this year, because I think it's going to be an avalanche once the first person takes it if you're trying to get that elite quarterback.
Yeah, and it's something we'll definitely touch on with the dual threat ability. But right before we get into the second point of our 2024 fantasy season recap, I just want to list to you the scoring points just to have some perspective on how historic a season this was for Lamar Jackson. So he had 430 points. Second place we just said was Josh Allen with 379. I'm going to list the next 3, and I want to see if you can guess them without looking.
Okay.
So after Josh Allen at 379 goes 372, 365, and 355. Who do you think QBs 3, 4, and 5 were finishing at the end of last year?
I have to assume it was Jaden. What do you say?
One of them was dual threat.
One of them was dual threat. I have to assume that that's Jaden. But you didn't say two of them, so Jalen's not in there.
Jalen's not in there.
I know probably Burrow, because I know Burrow, like, at the end of the season, he turned it up.
Burrow was 6 points behind Allen when it was all said and done.
Wow, that does
incredible.
For him not being a dual threat quarterback, that's pretty amazing. And I have no idea who the other guy would be.
My man,
No.
Baker Mayfield.
Really?
Baker, touchdown Baker, finished last season as QB4. Even as an avid fan of him, I did not realize that he finished the 4th overall fantasy quarterback last year. He just went off in the fantasy playoffs, and that's actually a big takeaway from last year as well, was that he was a big player on a lot of fantasy playoff rosters. So,
I'm looking at it right here. Baker Mayfield was ranked as quarterback 23 going into the draft process last year.
Yeah, so another good call by me, but we won't harp on it. Jamar Chase is the second point we're going to get into. Led all receivers with 403 PPR points. An absolutely insane performance from him last season, becoming only the 4th wide receiver in the history to top 400 points. He had a monster week 10 with 55.4 points, and over the season outscored the next best wide receiver by 94 points from week 3 and onwards.
Oh my.
He proved worthy of top pick status so early after a contract dispute, finishing clearly as wide receiver 1. He got his payday, and going to our point, if anyone could be in those top 5, people have him as the consensus number 1. I think what goes a little undervalued in the fantasy community is talking about how much the contract plays into the motivation to do that. Him and his good friend Joe Burrow were both on the same page. It was get him the rock as much as possible, get him paid as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And they accomplished that, and not to say that he's going to have any less intention going into this year. It's just there's that little extra drive when you just don't have the money, when you feel like you've been disrespected, and I have a feeling that he's not going to just outperform everybody by that large of a margin. I hope he proves me wrong, but 403 points for Jamar Chase. Second with 317 points was Justin Jefferson. Also impressive considering he had a little bit of an injury last year, but
yeah,
Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra Brown was right there with him with 316. But a league of his own last year for sure, Jamar Chase.
Something else to mention about the wide receivers too is looking down a little bit further down this list. I have it pulled up. 2 rookies in the top 6: Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors at number 4 and number 6, and those guys are also guys going around the turn of the 1st and 2nd round as sophomores in this year's fantasy football leagues. That's kind of crazy.
We've got a few sophomores to talk about, for sure. Mm-hmm. Not a sophomore, but I think he's I guess you could call him a junior, a rising junior going into this year. Another big point from last year. Jahmyr Gibbs emerged as the RB1 in PPR by the end of the year.
Technically, from a total perspective, because he played week 18 and went nuts, and Saquon sat out. But yes, technically he was running back 1.
But he technically finished as RB1 in PPR with 362.9 points. But to do that with the split with David Montgomery earlier in the year, very surprising. Led the NFL with 20 total touchdowns. The second year back showed improvement in goal line efficiency and shined when Montgomery got injured. He averaged 25 plus points per game in each playoff week, 15 through 18. So if you had him on your fantasy playoff roster, you were in not bad.
Pretty good shape. Yeah, you take 25 points per game from a player in the fantasy football playoffs.
This year is with the new OC and with David Montgomery healthy, how will that look? But a lot of people are saying that if David Montgomery goes down at any point, Jahmyr Gibbs should be kind of the consensus number 1 pick. But that being said, he does have David Montgomery. We do have a new OC, but that's a big takeaway from last year. Detroit Lions, one of the most fun teams to watch last year. It'll be interesting to see how everything shapes up with their offense and defense with the new coordinators on both sides this year.
Yeah, the Detroit Lions are an interesting case because it seems like they have a lot of mouths to feed, right? They're going to be an explosive offense, we know that. But you got Jahmyr Gibbs, you got the split with David Montgomery in the backfield. You got the elite wide receiver who's also a first-round talent, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jameson Williams is continuing to, kind of explode onto the scene. It's seen as that speedster that it seems like Dan Campbell really liked utilizing last year, and I think he's going to keep getting utilized a little bit more. So there's significant fantasy players on the Detroit Lions, and it's a double-edged sword, right? Because when you're such an explosive offense, obviously you're going to get more opportunities for scoring, but there's more mouths to feed. So it's an interesting case in my debate in that number one running back spot between Bijan, Saquon, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Saquon and Jahmyr Gibbs are on really good teams. Jahmyr and Saquon have a lot of mouths to feed. Bijan's on a decent team, but with basically a rookie quarterback in Michael Penix, not as many options. You got Drake London on that team, but it's basically just Drake London and Bijan, in my opinion, from a scoring perspective on the Falcons. It's going to be interesting to see if any of those guys and which of those three guys finishes as their RB1 going into 2025.
So we do have to talk about Saquon. Of course, we're going to acknowledge what an insane year he had last year. It breaks my heart as a Giants fan to watch him do all this for the Eagles, win the Super Bowl with the Eagles. But I'm so happy for him because he is one of ours. I don't buy into the Giants fans that are like, they're like, he abandoned us. It's like, no, he
did not abandon. Your owner abandoned him.
Because you want to pay Daniel Jones, and Daniel, please, if you ever see this, I love you as a person, and you did a lot of good stuff for us. Loved getting a playoff win. It's just you.
Yeah, loved ruining my franchise for that one playoff win.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it was the worst thing that ever could have happened. My friend. And we watched that. I was like, this is a lose-lose.
Yeah.
This is a lose-lose. You deserved a win with Kirk, and now we get Daniel Jones for longer. And it's just not that we got you, Daniel. It's just we wanted Saquon.
Yeah.
We wanted Saquon. It's just that's our guy. Anyways, but before we get to that, you left out a very key point there. One of the fantasy players on the Detroit Lions. And he finished 6th overall at his position, if you might know.
Laporta. Yeah, Laporta too. That's another mouth you got to feed on that team.
Nope.
You're not talking about Laporta.
QB6 of fantasy football last year.
Yeah.
Jared finished 6th overall.
Jared Goof.
With 324.46 points. So a decent gap between him and Daniels at 5. But he was number 6, 2 spots above Jalen Hurts, 4 spots above Kyler Murray, 6 spots above Patrick Mahomes. He went off last year.
Yeah. I mean, but like I said, that's kind of a result of a explosive offense rather than another mouth to feed, right? If Amon-Ra, Laporta, Jameson Williams, Gibbs, from a receiving perspective, if they're eating, Jared Goff is eating too. Not that Jared Goff did not have an amazing season. He was in MVP conversations in the real life NFL, not fantasy, until that 5 interception game he had. But
that was bad. But you know what? It's one of those things where if we're going to project the Lions, and we do have to get moving here to touch all these other points with the recap, but if we're going to give the Lions these projections and this credit for being such an explosive offense, we're going to project that going into this year, then we got to give Jared Goff his props and understand that he might be one of the better values at quarterback going into this year. So we'll see. Connor and I had a lot of great projections going into last year that we might have to just string together some highlights just to put it out there. So we might have been the most accurate.
We were pretty damn good. I was looking back at some episodes. We made a few mistakes. But
Saquon, there were some receivers. Well, I can't even remember. We had some great calls, though. But anyways, moving on, we talked about Saquon Barkley, and this is something that he deserves all the flowers he gets for this. First year in Philly, he was drafted around 10th last year, going as about RB5. And I kind of came on and was like, I'm taking him as my RB1. And you could have, of course, said it was questionable. But for someone at that caliber, you could say just raw talent, why couldn't he be just as talented in every aspect as CMC was for the 49ers the year before? And then you put him in an offense with such a good line. The real question was, is Jalen Hurts going to take his touchdowns? Is Saquon going to have the passing upside? Well, he finished RB2 with 355 points, eclipsed 2,000 yards rushing, and he just did all these insane things, and it's still finished a few points behind being RB1, sitting an extra week. Mm-hmm. He led all RBs with 22.2 PPR points per game. He had 5 games over 30 points. I had him. It was really fun. 15 total touchdowns, and he really just lived up to the expectations. Like we said, won that Super Bowl. So just gotta give Saquon his flowers. I don't know if you have anything new to say about, but we'll of course be touching on him, throughout the preseason.
Pause. Yeah, no, but we will be.
A good pause. Ben's been hitting me recently. He's been pausing. I see where he gets.
I love hitting someone with the pause, and then if someone says it back to me, I just go resume.
I might have to spit that one back.
Yeah.
Pause.
Resume. Spit that. Oh, I see what you did there. Yeah, that's good.
Oops.
Yeah.
Be friendly, but moving on. Brock Bowers. Let's get into rookie tight end. Broke records, 112 receptions last year, 1,194 yards, an NFL record for a rookie tight end.
A lot of records broken last year, honestly.
7.7 PPR points. Surpassed the previous rookie tight end record set just the year before by Sam Laporta. Finished as tight end 1 as a rookie, proving that he is an elite talent and can kind of knock that rookie tight end myth, and that was with very subpar quarterback play. So Brock Bowers, if you had him in any kind of keeper league, what an amazing talent, and he's kind of, unless Kelsey just finds some way to turn a Tom Brady season around or something like that, he might be getting the crown pretty soon, Brock Bowers.
It's him and Trey McBride. I mean, they are the consensus 2 top tight ends, it looks like, in the NFL from a fantasy perspective right now. I'm not going to say overall because, Kittle's probably a better, well-rounded tight end than at least McBride. But from a receiving perspective, from a fantasy perspective, it's Brock Bowers and Trey McBride. They're going as early as the second round, both of them, in 2025 PPR fantasy league drafts. And that's basically only Kelsey territory that we've seen before. I think Sam Laporta might have snuck into some second rounds last year. He was overall pretty disappointing for where he was drafted, but these guys are studs. I mean, Brock Bowers and Trey McBride, they are just wide receivers and big bodies, technically listed at the tight end position, but they are full-on route runners. Brock Bowers is unbelievably strong. He's a great route runner. Trey McBride, I think, is an even better route runner and freakishly athletic. It's going to be interesting to see which of those two guys is tight end 1 at the end of the season. I think my guess would be Brock Bowers, just because, like you said, Brock Bowers did all these records and amazing stuff with a subpar quarterback, and Geno Smith he's not a bad quarterback. He's an average quarterback in the NFL, and he loves his tight ends. Noah Fant always seemed to get like 5 or 6 targets a game when he was on the Seahawks, and now you got Brock Bowers as your safety blanket, as a quarterback learning a new system. I mean, I think Brock Bowers, he might deserve that second round placement that he has in 2025 drafts.
I mean, yeah, Mike Clay has him at 20 overall, and kind of rightfully so. It's one of those things where, like, do you really think you can project a better value? But then there's other tight ends that are further down the list that you got to consider. Like Kelsey's going projected 83 overall. Now, if he has any season like he did last year, of course, that's about accurate. Mm-hmm. But he's one of those guys where if you can project a resurgence season, then you can maybe get a greater value later on. But he's looking like that Travis Kelce type. Pick him early on and just know that you have a stud at the position.
It's definitely something we're going to have to talk about whenever we get to a draft or whenever we get to a drafting strategies video, because those guys, especially Brock Bowers, I feel pretty confident that he's going to be a studly tight end, especially with how bad the tight end position was last year. I mean, we were just looking at it before the podcast started, but you had Jonnu Smith as tight end 4 in fantasy leagues last year. Zach Ertz is tight end 7. I mean, this is crazy. These are guys that no one was drafting, but there definitely are some value picks later on. I mean, you got TJ Hawkinson at pick 69, tight end 5. You've got a guy like Evan Ingram, who, if he stays healthy, he's always been a great receiving threat, all the way down at 86. I mean, there are options for tight ends lower in the draft, but they're going to be hit or miss. Do you just swing on someone who you know is going to be a stud like Brock Bowers?
I have a little bit of what I think is an insight that I feel like has been an original thought. I could obviously just be giving myself more credit, but I always thought of the tight end when I happened to have a good tight end. If I happened to take a Travis Kelce early on and it worked out, I always noticed that come playoff time, even though I might be worse off at another position because I didn't take 2 RBs and wide receiver early, that the gap between the RB3 types and the wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 3 types, and the gap between a tight end 1 and a tight end 2 were
it's so humongous.
Fall off. It's like there's 10 usable tight ends if you're lucky, and then it's like no production from the rest. Mm-hmm. And so if you had an elite tight end, it wasn't just like you had one of the 10, it was you have someone who might be scoring like 3-4 more points a game than even good ones, and then you might just be matched up against someone who doesn't even have one of the good ones.
Right. I mean, if you're saying it's a difference, if you're saying it's a difference between like Brock Bowers scoring 16 points and David Njoku scoring 8, that 8-point difference, that's the difference between Jamar Chase scoring 22 and like Calvin Ridley scoring 14. I mean, that's a humongous gap.
Jonnu Smith was a big surprise going into last year. How about we touch on a couple more key takeaways from 2024. We'll kind of rattle them off. You give me a quick reaction, and then we can keep going on with this sort of 2024 recap and early 2025 look. So let's get into it. I mean, 2024 we talked about already. A huge year for young players. There was a big movement amongst rookies and sophomores, and you had things like Jaden Daniels was, oh my gosh, like where the hell did he come out of? He looked like a seasoned vet. Won Fantasy Rookie of the Year after posting 355 points. I mean, QB5 in his first year, and he started very slow. I remember watching him against Baker, I think it was week 1, thinking like, he's a rookie, he'll get better throughout the year. But he showed like nothing of what he did in the coming weeks. And then obviously, towards the end of the season, making it to the NFC Championship game. Absolutely insane. Second most ever by a rookie quarterback. 30 touchdowns, obviously dual threat upside, 700 plus rushing yards for him. Made him the number 2 NFL draft pick going into the year, and this year has to be considered as absolutely possible to finish as QB1 if Lamar Jackson regresses at all. But we'll see how that happens. Just a couple other notes from the young players. Rookie Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. both had historic debut years. Neighbors caught 109 balls, a Giants franchise record. Pause. Resume. Which a Giants franchise record. And I don't know if you remember Odell Beckham from the year 2014. He had a pretty good rookie year.
Don't know if you remember Victor Cruz, but
that's right. So he did that with some poor quarterback play. With a Daniel Jones got dropped, and then a Drew Lock for the rest of the year, and now we
some Tommy DeVito in there.
Play, so who knows what's to come with him. And Thomas Jr. piled up 284 PPR points, 6th most ever by a rookie wide receiver. An absolutely hot finish, 6 straight double-digit target games. And then you had other people like sophomore Puka Nacua continued to absolutely go off, even with some injury questions and Cooper Kupp going down here and there. It was like he really came into his own as the lead, which if you ever had Cooper Kupp a couple years ago when he had that Triple Crown season, it's just such a shock to think that someone with him on the same team and the same offense could take over as number 1. So kind of changing of the guard at wide receiver will be interesting to see how Devontae Adams plays into that. But that's the youth movement and breakouts from 2024. Any notes on any of those players that just come to mind?
Yeah, as talking about the rookie and the sophomore breakout, especially hitting on the rookies, like you said, you mentioned Brian Thomas Jr., you mentioned Malik Neighbors. We've already talked about Brock Bowers. There's also Ladd McConkey, who was a really, really big star rookie wide receiver for the Chargers. And there's one guy we didn't mention here who I'm curious to hear your quick takes about if he can kind of come back from a struggling rookie season is Marvin Harrison Jr. All 4 of those guys that I mentioned, BTJ, Bowers, Neighbors, and Ladd McConkey, all had better fantasy seasons than Marvin Harrison Jr., who was taken in the 2nd round of 2024 fantasy football draft, 2nd, 3rd round in PPR leagues last year. So he had a struggling rookie season, but he obviously has the talent. He had that one breakout week, I think it was like week 2, where he was phenomenal. But besides that, he was relatively quiet. Is it a Kyler Murray issue? Is it a him issue? Does he have any chance to kind of avoid a sophomore slump and instead have a stellar sophomore season?
I mean, I don't know how you can really have a slump after kind of that start with the expectations he had going into it. But the important thing to keep in mind is that coming into last season, Marvin Harrison Jr. was an absolute prospect, like a Julio Jones level prospect coming into the league. It had all the hype in the world and not a whole lot of competition to go around with it. But a new coach for the Cardinals, a new system, and that was something that this year, going into his 2nd year as the head coach, he said he was a rookie. Not all rookies are coming in and just, get all the targets and are such ball hogs. Some coaches like to play the more team-focused game where you spread the ball out a little bit and then, you kind of earn your chops as you go on. And Marvin Harrison Jr. gained a bunch of muscle weight, apparently bulked up coming into this year. And
can't trust those things. You see that it's like the center, the NBA centers who post videos of them shooting 70% from 3 on 100 attempts.
Who knows? But anyways, a lot to say that the young players last year were something to watch, and going into this year, there'll be a lot of sophomores to watch and a lot of rookies to watch as well, which we'll touch on. Second point, key takeaways from 2024: the elite QBs did dominate. Absolutely. If you took an elite quarterback last year, with the kind of exception of Patrick Mahomes, you were rewarded for it. Jackson obviously had his record year. Allen's late season fireworks were amazing. He had a 52-point week and 93.2 points between weeks 14 and 15. He absolutely, it's just the upside of an elite quarterback is just so valuable in fantasy, and it just stands out so much against a pocket passing quarterback. But, like I said, Mahomes dropped. He was drafted 2nd on average, but finished QB 12. with less than 285 points for the second straight year. So we'll see. And then you also had quarterbacks like Anthony Richardson were really hyped going into their sophomore year, but he was a dual threat quarterback, and that comes with injury risk. He only managed 11 games and 14.9 points per game with these injuries.
One of the most disappointing players, I would say, of the 2024 season. People were calling him a sleeper pick, even though he was in the 70s. That was delusional. I mean, he's fighting for his job with Daniel Jones right now. He can't even beat Daniel Jones in a QB battle in camp right now. This is not looking good for Anthony Richardson.
Definitely not. So the lesson is that a proven dual threat quarterback can be absolute fantasy gold, but a mid-tier or a pocket passer can be a more risky play that can absolutely disappoint if taken too early, and it might be worth waiting. So adjust your strategies accordingly. So that's it with elite quarterbacks. There were a couple resurgent veterans and surprise stars. Yeah, like I said, we have Baker Mayfield.
Baker, touchdown maker.
Quarterback, 4,500 yards, 45 total touchdowns. Got a well-earned increase in his guaranteed money on his contract. You had Jared Goff, like I said, finished 6th overall, 19.1 points per game despite being drafted quarterback 19. Sam Darnold came out of nowhere, and I talked pretty badly about Sam Darnold for a couple years. I'm not gonna lie. I'm glad we didn't have the podcast going.
Wait. That's what I got on right now.
Awesome. You got the Sam Darnold Jets love. Good. It's really nice to see. It takes quarterbacks some time. Sometimes you just need to get used to the league.
Well, you also have to get off of the Jets. That's the other thing you have to do. Geno Smith and Sam Darnold have proven that there is just a curse on the Jets. Aaron Rodgers is next on it. Justin Fields looks awful in camp right now.
So I'm not gonna fight that at all. I think that's a totally reasonable thing to say. I'm not one to believe in superstition, but that being said, if any organization was to be cursed, it probably would be the Jets.
Sam Darnold was seeing ghosts.
That's absolutely right. So that being said, there are vets that can be a league winner. It's some surprising stars that come out of nowhere. So keep your eye on the kinds of guys that were talented upside. These guys that were drafted very high up and when they were coming into the league that sort of maybe underperformed in a bad system. So keep an eye out for those kinds of guys. Quick notes on some running back opportunities. Some star running backs changed teams, and many thrived in those environments. We talked about Barkley on the Eagles. You got Josh Jacobs, rebounded from an injury-plagued 2023 to post 1,300 rushing yards and 15 touchdowns with Green Bay. He was, sort of like a Derrick Henry light in that sense. He was part of a free.
He was one of my good projections from this. I had him as a running back 9 going into the season, and that's about where he finished. Although he was ranked about running back 15 or 16 by ESPN.
And then Derrick Henry, shining with the Ravens. It was one of those things where all these running backs, they had that collective group chat where they said, we need to change how running backs are valued in this league. And a lot of these running backs took a stand and said, we're not going to settle for our teams that we've been with just because we've been with them. Mm-hmm. We deserve what we deserve. And they all got paid and they all proved their worth on their new teams. And there's a lot of discussion on the running back value changing going into this year. The key takeaway, don't fear a talented running back on a new team.
No.
If you got a situation that seems to be good, a good O-line, a good scheme, you can have a running back that really, really stands out.
There's definitely not as many highly touted running backs changing teams this year as there was last year, but the point stands.
Not as many. But that to be said, of course, everything in fantasy is nothing's certain. Take things with a grain of salt. Travis Etienne was one of those guys that was going to like 3rd round. And
awful. That might be the biggest bust.
He finished as RB3 in 2023 and then got 8.7 points per game in 2024. And then Tanks Bigsby emerged. So, always take things with a grain of salt.
Running back hierarchies always change throughout the season, and that is a scary thing when you do have to think about drafting a running back. Rachaad White, I believe, was listed as running back 13 or 14 going to last year, and the emergence of Bucky Irving, also Bucky Irving, my Lord and Savior, he completely changed that. He was, I think, one of the most common players on Fantasy Football Champion winners last year. We'll talk about this when it comes to specific split backfields in future episodes, especially the running back episode, but you have to be wary of those split backfields.
For sure. That kind of goes into the next point, which is be cautious of injuries. There's cautionary tales about this, which is if there is an injury-prone player, and that is a real thing. There are genetic muscle pull prone players. And I know that because I was one when I was in high school and early on in college. It's like some people just can't avoid it. And you look at someone like Christian
Unlike
McCaffrey,
me, who's got amazing knees.
Amazing knees. If you're joining our podcast for the first time, Connor might have the worst knees, east of the Mississippi. And it's something that is constantly joked about on this podcast. We love him, and we're so grateful that his knees have stayed intact for over a calendar year now. But that being, if you have someone like Christian McCaffrey who has a history of injuries, you have to bake that into your projections. Just because they had a 17-game season the year before doesn't mean that they're going to, and honestly, a lot of the time, you surpass a certain carry amount, and that actually is a negative correlation going into the next year with their durability. If someone like Joe Mixon last year struggled with those foot injuries, because he had carried all the workload of the year before with Cincinnati. So when you're going into a year and if you're going to make your own projections, someone like Christian McCaffrey, who if he plays 17 games, absolutely could be RB1. You have to almost project him out for something like 14 games. You want to say, like, what are the odds he tweaks something and he's out for a game or two, and then what are the odds that he, strains a hamstring and he's out for 6 weeks, and you have to factor that in, of course.
CMC is going to be an extremely interesting take in our mock draft episode or our running back episode. He still is the 7th overall pick in fantasy PPR drafts right now, and that is an extremely, extremely risky maneuver for someone who we just saw last year barely played and was not even that amazing when he did play.
If someone was to take McCaffrey number 1 overall, I wouldn't have a problem with it because they're making a bet that he stays healthy. That's a gamble that I would be okay with, because if it pays off, you could have the best player in fantasy again by quite a mile.
I'm just not sure he's going to have the workload this year. It seems like they are a worse team than they have ever been since McCaffrey has been there, and it does seem like, from what I've heard, Shanahan is going to try to limit his use a little bit.
Well, you have to at this point. If it's someone who's been this injury prone and he's getting older, you have to dial it down.
He just can't compete with the workhorses like Bijan, Saquon, Gibbs, Henry even at this point in his career.
Someone like him going at 7, it's not because you think he'll finish at the 7th overall fantasy player. It's because he has a wide range of outcomes where he could finish number 1, or he could finish number 12, or he could finish like way down, and you average those out and he kind of sits around 7. But I think both of us would be surprised if that's actually where he finished. I think, both of us would kind of expect him to be maybe higher or lower by the end of the season. But
I have a C-man guarantee that he does not finish above Bijan, Saquon, or Gibbs. I put almost a 5% chance that he beats any of those 3 guys if one of those top 3 does not have a significant injury. I don't see a world where Christian McCaffrey is an RB1 going into the Lord's year of 2025.
No, maybe not, but we'll see. We'll see. And that's the fun part about it. We got a couple weeks ahead to draft up what we think of it and do some actual drafts. So that's really exciting. But just to wrap up the 2024 season, it reaffirmed that receivers also are just like elite receivers that are target hogs are king in fantasy football with PPR scoring. Mm-hmm. Besides Chase's historic year, Jefferson, like I said, finished wide receiver 2 with 317 points. And you had Devontae Adams was still reliable. He finished wide receiver 11, but had a change of his team mid-season. Like, that's very impressive, especially going to a team like the Jets that have an established wide receiver 1 in Garrett Wilson. And then you also have a flood of new receiving talent. We talked about Puka Nacua being a top 10 wide receiver. CeeDee Lamb being wide receiver number 3 overall. He seems to be one of those really solid, reliable, elite receivers year after year now. And then you have these kinds of fill-in receivers, like Juwan Jennings had a 46.5-point week 3. It's like these guys that you can just plug and play. A receiver that gets targets can be, absolutely key to you winning fantasy games. Volume is absolutely key. People like Malik Neighbors that we talked about. So you got that. You got T. Higgins. Whenever Chase was contained, T. Higgins would break out. He had multiple 40-point games, including championship week.
Much more one of those boomer bust kind of guys, though, T. Higgins. When you have a guy, like you said, volume is king, and when you have someone else who can steal that volume, it makes you a much more volatile player, and that's something you have to think about in your drafting strategies, is you need to have a mix of those guys who, like Jamar, is basically always going to give you a 25 piece, and those guys like Juwan Jennings, T. Higgins, who can give you a 30 bomb, but also could give you a 5-point bomb.
That's right. So there's a wide range of outcomes, but an elite wide receiver that's a target hog can really do a lot for you in your fantasy team. So overall 2024, record-setting performances, a lot of lessons to take away in your draft strategy. And there's a preview of the next generation of stars that we're going to be talking about for years to come. It feels like that era of the guys that we would see in the top 5 year after year. It's like it's slowly starting to trickle away into this newer generation.
Yeah, I mean the Kelseys are going, and like the older, like Christian McCaffrey seem like they're on their way out. I mean, you got maybe a year or two more of Henry and Saquon, but like it does feel like we have a lot of new talent that's going to start dominating fantasy football for a few years to come. Those Pukas, the Malik Neighbors, Jamar Chase, Jahmyr Gibbs, Ashton Genty, Amon-Ra St. Brown.
These guys that were the core of our rosters for years, like Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams falling down the draft boards. It's like, it doesn't feel right, but also like, it's like it had to happen eventually. So
yeah.
Anyways, let's get into maybe this last thing we can touch on in this first episode would be the early reactions to the 2025 preseason rankings. What do you think about that? Let's get into it. Well, top 10 overall going into 2025. We got Jamar Chase number 1. Bijan Robinson is ranked number 2. Justin Jefferson number 3. So we still got 2 of those top tier receivers that we've been arguing about for a couple years now going in the top 3 spots. Number 4, Saquon Barkley as RB2. Not too surprising. Jahmyr Gibbs number 5, like we said, will kind of be volume dependent depending on how much David Montgomery is involved in this new offense. CeeDee Lamb number 6. And Christian McCaffrey number 7, which is in my eyes sort of rounding out that elite running back wide receiver. If you had to say S-tier receivers and S-tier running backs, that's what kind of rounds it out for me. McCaffrey obviously with the injury questions. And then after 7, you have Puka Nacua at number 8, which is interesting to me given that Devontae Adams is going to be there. I think that has some room for discussion if we wanted to. And then Malik Neighbors breaking in as a sophomore, going number 9 overall, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown wrapping up our top 10 at number 10 and wide receiver 6. So all receivers and running backs in the top 10, no tight ends. Obviously no quarterbacks, but what do you think about that? Who stands out to you the most out of that top 10 going into this year?
I think the guy, someone I want to talk about, not that he stands out to me the most necessarily, is Puka Nacua. You said that, he gets Devontae Adams as a teammate. Is he still a top 10 pick worthy? I think he is. I mean, we saw with Cooper Kupp for 2 years that even with Cooper Kupp, obviously he slowed down a little bit last year, but you can even say, was Cooper Kupp really slowing down, or was Puka just hogging all of his targets? I mean, he, with another elite wide receiver besides him for 2 years, has continued to put up elite fantasy performances, and I don't think Devontae Adams is going to stop that. I am still completely okay taking Puka Nacua with the first-round pick. But the guy who stands out to me, I think the most, I don't know if there's a guy who really stands out to me. I think this is a pretty solid top 10. I would prefer to be either at the turn or at like pick 5 in this draft. I don't really want pick 2 because it feels like Bijan, Justin Jefferson, Saquon, Gibbs, like it feels very hard to determine which one of those guys is number 2 or number 3. But like you said, like we separate these things by tiers, not necessarily this is going to be number 2, this is going to be number 3. And it does feel like maybe you include CD in that tier. Maybe if you're super high on CMC, you include him in that tier. But like 2 through 5, if you're going to say Jamar Chase is the 1-1, seem very, very comparable. And it's really picking hairs about which one is going to be the best. And then at the turn, you have those guys like Puka Nacua, Malik Neighbors, Amon-Ra, Ashton Genty, Nico Collins, that could be like wide receiver 1s, and I like taking those guys at the turn.
That's right, and there are a lot of interesting names at the turn, so maybe we should go into 11 through 20. But yeah, I mean, these guys that stood out to me are the ones that I didn't expect to be like. Honestly, I mean, Puka Nacua, I've had him for 2 years now, so I understand that, and I do agree.
You're used to his greatness.
I do get cautious when someone like Devontae Adams comes in, because that's a guy that Matt Stafford plays favorites. If he just falls in love with Devontae Adams, he might just throw him a bunch of jump balls in the end zone. Who knows? But I also love Puka Nacua, so I have no problem with him going number 8. I think that's probably right. Malik Neighbors stood out to me. As a Giants fan, I know how awesome he was, and I know how awesome he can be. It just still doesn't sit right. It just doesn't feel right that Malik Neighbors would be projected to outperform someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I would put Amon-Ra above Malik Neighbors for sure, and I would probably put Nico Collins above Malik Neighbors as well, but I think that he's well within that first, second round turn area.
but you're going to hear some interesting names in the 11 through 20 range that are going to stand out as guys that you're kind of surprised didn't fall into this top 10 category, and then some names that you might be surprised are in the top 20 at all. And
I see which name. I already see which name you're about to mention there, and I'm completely with you on how this guy is a top 20 pick.
Ashton Gianti, the rookie for the Vegas Raiders, projected as RB5, and something that I just learned, I think today, was how amazing of a receiving year he had in college 2 years ago. Apparently, he led the FBS in receptions 2 years ago at Boise State. And obviously last year was just an absolute monster. He was setting records left and right. People were really considering that he might have been up there for the greatest college running back season of all time. Just a absolute wreck.
And still not winning the Heisman.
But the projections have him as getting something like 300 plus touches as a rookie in a Pete Carroll Vegas Raiders offense. And if you remember anything about Pete Carroll's offenses,
he loves to pound that rock.
He loves to pound the rock, he loves to run it, and he loves to have a workhorse back. So you're looking at a rookie here in Ashton Gianti that can just absolutely stand out. But let's get through the list here. Ashton Gianti 11, Devon Achane number 12, Nico Collins number 13, Brian Thomas Jr. 14, AJ Brown 15, Drake London 16, Jonathan Taylor 17, and then we get into Josh Jacobs at 18, Derrick Henry 19, and Brock Bowers rounding up the top 20. Brock Bowers tight end 1 at position 20 for the Vegas Raiders. So again, let's just point out, just give me like your top 3 that just stand out as kind of surprises for you in that 11 through 20.
I mean, it is no question me. The guy who surprised me the most is Drake London. How is he the 16th overall pick? I don't see it. He's a unproven guy still, in my opinion. He's had some good games, but we have not seen consistent 20-point performances from him. And yes, you have a gunslinging quarterback, cool, right? But he's also basically a rookie quarterback who is not the most accurate, and he's not going to make the best decisions for a middling Atlanta Falcons team that does include Bijan frickin' Robinson, who's going to steal most of those touchdowns, in my opinion. We got tricked by this last year. I think he was projected like 2nd or 3rd round last year, and I thought that was too high. I was correct, and now he's even higher. I don't understand that in the slightest. Another guy I'm a little bit surprised to see there is Jonathan Taylor. He feels a little bit high in my opinion too. He had some good games. He did finish like around like the 10th running back, I think, in my opinion, but this is going to be again a worse Colts team, and he did have some gaffes at the end of the season, and I think he's not going to be an RB7 level guy. I would feel more comfortable taking him in the 3rd round than the 2nd round. And finally, the last guy, who I would not say surprises me, but I think surprises some people, is Devon Achane. He is going as running back 6. He's going as pick 12 in the ESPN PPR rankings right now. And people don't realize he did finish as RB5 last year. He doesn't have that competition with Raheem Mostert anymore. Jalen Wright, some people thought was going to be a sleeper pick in leagues last year. He did not really get the action, the burn that some people thought he was going to get. I think that Devon Achane is a pretty safe. I mean, obviously you can never account for injuries or anything like that, but I think this Dolphins team is going to be better all around as long as Tua can stay healthy and outside of a mental hospital for continuous concussions. And I think Devon Achane is a guy who can go with the 1st, 2nd round turn, obviously with some risk, but with some immense upside as well.
Interesting. You and I, he stands out for different reasons to you and I. So I would also include him in my top 3. I want to put Ashton Gianti in there just because I think it's just so exciting to have a rookie with so much upside. This feels to me like Saquon going into his rookie year, one of these generational prospects that's supposed to be going into a volume-heavy offense right away. You got Pete Carroll. It's just probably going to turn that team around to some extent, obviously better, hopefully, than they were last year. Mm-hmm. But my top 3, Devon Achane. I would say Nico Collins stands out to me there, and I agree also Drake London. So Devon Achane, I was looking into it. Yes, finished RB5, so he did get there at the end of the day. But I wonder if his efficiency dropped, but his volume went up towards the end of last year. If that will continue, or if they'll go back to maybe more of the split because his efficiency was so much better when he wasn't getting all the touches. I remember when Raheem Mostert was scoring 20, he scored 20 touchdowns that one year.
21 touchdowns. It was crazy.
Saying Devon Achane was like, it seemed like he was running for 15 yards a play, and it was the most. And we were just like,
I mean, we knew that was not sustainable, right? Like,
Of course, but still, even when he kind of came back to earth, it was still like 8 yards a carry, and everyone was like, "This guy's insane." But at the end of the day, he's not a power back. And he'd go in there on third down. Tyreek Hill just came out and said, he's not a power back. He goes in on third down. The team knows we're not running up the middle because that's not what he does.
I agree.
I have some concerns, but he is a great pass catcher. He had a ton of receptions last year. But it still stands out to me as something that I wouldn't be comfortable putting him above. Honestly, someone like Derrick Henry. I know it's hard to say, but Derrick Henry just screams LeBron James to me. He screams
longevity, so much longevity. I wanted to mention Derrick Henry too, but I'm not saying I have overdrafted Derrick Henry in a few mock drafts. Sometimes even I've never taken him over Achane, but I have taken him over like Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs. I have taken him over guys like AJ Brown and Drake London. I don't think I've been taking him over Achane, but I can see the argument Derrick Henry versus Devon Achane.
Derrick Henry is going to run to an unlucky injury or something like that. And maybe I'm biased because I hear all these things about how he spends all this money taking care of his body. But he seems like one of those guys that's just primed to fall into the end 15 times again.
Derrick Henry's really just like me, for real.
7-person gap between him and Devon Achane. That's it for me. Nico Collins, this also might be a bias for me just not having him enough in other fantasy leagues, but I just don't see him as wide receiver 7. I don't see how you could draft him above Brian Thomas Jr., AJ Brown. It just doesn't make sense.
As an AJ Brown owner in fantasy the last 2 years, I can't see how you could draft him over AJ Brown. He's an infuriating, despite how good he is, infuriating guy to have on your roster.
Okay, so maybe that's just from an experience on my end, but Nico Collins, I just don't have much confidence about.
I agree that there was. CJ Stroud had a sophomore slump of a season, right? It is going to come down a lot. It's going to come down a lot to if CJ Stroud is more like his rookie year self or his sophomore year self. If it's a sophomore year self, he probably can't get to wide receiver 7. But if it's a rookie year self, I can easily see him getting to wide receiver 7.
Yeah, and then Drake London, I don't want to add anything to what you said. I absolutely agree. Now, he did come on at the end of last year, and we could argue, and I think this is something that does go undervalued in the fantasy community. You could argue that the connection with the quarterback is the thing that really drives the volume. If Penix loves going to him, he's going to keep going to him. And if that was any sign at the end of last season, I could see him definitely outperforming how he did last year. But you're right, just sitting at 16 just doesn't feel right.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't feel right. The stats can say whatever they want. It doesn't feel right, though.
That's the issue. You and I are such logical, statistical people, but you're not into that. You're just like, nah, the feeling trumps that one. The feeling trumps out.
He was wide receiver 11 going into last year, so basically the same spot as this year, and he did not. I don't have it up right now, but he did not finish as wide receiver 11. I don't think, and if he did, it was a late season surge, and so that's something difficult to ration with when you are thinking about fantasy football. Is sometimes the last 3 or 4 weeks of a season. Do you think that's going to project to the entire 2025, or is that just trying something out, or was that just a little hot stretch that got lucky, right? It really, and it sounds like a broken record, but it's really just going to come down to if Michael Penix Jr. is a capable NFL quarterback, which I think we have yet to see.
But anyway, but the Falcons are going to be a team to watch out for sure. It's gonna be fun to watch. We'll see if Kyle Pitts comes into the equation at all. But let's get on to players 21 through 30, just so we can wrap up episode 1 with a good kind of recap of rounded out top 30 projections, just to give our fans, the Gogertzone podcast fans. Appreciate all of you.
All of you guys, cricket noises.
Getting an idea going into this season. Hey, we got a hell of a subscriber base over there. I don't know what you thought. We had like 400 views on the one.
Yeah, we did.
This season shapes out, but point being, 11 through 20, you still got a lot of good talent, and you got some running backs towards the end of that. The 17, 18, 19, 20 that could absolutely kind of be your rock if you wanted to take one of those like stud wide receivers if you were an early pick. So a lot of talent there to still be had in running back. 21 through 30, Trey McBride, tight end 2 at 21. Bucky Irving, RB10 at number 22. Kyron Williams, RB11 at number 23. Ladd McConkey, wide receiver 11 at number 24. T. Higgins, receiver 12 at 25. Tyreek Hill from Miami, I think it's like the first year he's been this low. Mm-hmm. Wide receiver 13 at number 26. Behind him, another older elite player, Devontae Adams, wide receiver 14, going 27. And then the quarterbacks start to come in. You got Josh Allen projected to be the QB1 this year, which doesn't quite sit right to me, but
by a smidge.
It's give or take. It's him, and then it's Lamar in at least Mike Clay's projections going into the year. Lamar at QB2, number 29, and then rounding out the top 30. If you were assuming kind of a QB rush, you got Jaden Daniels at QB3, rounding it out at number 30. And just to mention it, because if we're going to round out at 30, it's worth mentioning Jalen Hurts is right there next at 31.
Like I said, it's those four quarterbacks coming like an avalanche off the board once that first one goes.
Expectation being in that mid-third round, the elite quarterbacks kind of come off at an avalanche, and those top four kind of sit in a world of their own. I've heard Burrow get kind of grouped into that S tier before, just because of how sick of a year he had last year. I personally have a harder time doing it without the legs. Mm-hmm. But that's 21 through 30, finishing off with your four dual threat elite quarterbacks. What stands out to you on that 21 through 30?
There is one guy that stands out so heavily to me. It's Tyreek Hill. I mean, like I said, there is volatility there, but the potential to get wide receiver 1 from 2023, or maybe wide receiver 2, I don't know if it was Jettas or him, one of the top wide receivers from 2023 at pick 26 in the third round, wide receiver 13, I mean, he still has the speed. I mean, we've been seeing him run 100-meter sprints in the offseason. He's running like 10-second 100-meter dashes. I mean, he's still got the speed, and if Tua can stay healthy, that is an unbelievable value for Tyreek Hill. I am running to get Tyreek Hill at pick 26 in drafts.
It really is. I mean, the issue is, you see where he finished last year. It looks like he finished around receiver maybe 16, if I'm seeing this correctly. 200.
And how does it get worse than that? I mean, like at a minimum, how does it get worse than that?
He just had like the worst year of his career, and it wasn't because he got old and untalented. Like, he's still just as freaking fast as he always was. You know, he's challenging Noah Lyles to 100-meter sprints. Regardless. It's like he hasn't lost his main talent, which is his hands and his speed.
Yeah.
And so that being said, it really is just a matter of how he fits into this offense. I love that point, because you're talking third round, and he could be the number 1 wide receiver overall. You know, like, no one would be surprised.
Yeah.
It'd be like, sure, he came back.
Like, I didn't expect that, but like, it's not like I'm surprised. Like, it's not like I wouldn't have put money on him being wide receiver 1, but like,
this is not a guy that you expect to just start getting a little bit worse because of his age. He still should be right there with his main skill set, which is his speed.
I mean, I'm just looking at the guys that are around Tyreek, the two guys right above him, Ladd McConkey and T. Higgins. T. Higgins is a wide receiver 2 on his team. And Ladd McConkey, he's a great route runner, but like, it's not like he's the fastest guy. He's not like he's got the highest vertical leap ever. And it's not like he's on a wildly better team than Tyreek Hill. I mean, I can't imagine myself drafting Ladd McConkey or T. Higgins, as much as I love Ladd McConkey, above Tyreek frickin' Hill.
Yeah, but this gives me I have a theme for this 21 through 30, which is it's divided by young talent and elite guys getting disrespected. And so you have Trey McBride, Bucky Irving, Kyron Williams, Ladd McConkey.
Bucky!
As these young studs that we're expecting to have really great years. Now, it's like possible they slump a little bit, but like, these are those guys that have that breakout potential. These guys that if they finished in the top 3 for their position, we wouldn't necessarily be surprised. Especially Trey McBride, of course, at tight end too. Yep. But these are great guys. Kyron Williams is in talk for an extension. Bucky Irving stood out. He obviously was a stud. Ladd McConkey was just an absolute target hog. And then you got, like, below them, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, T. Higgins. I mean, T. Higgins, of course, we said was wide receiver 2. But these are guys that could be the core of your lineup that you're getting in the third round here. Mm-hmm. And then you got the quarterbacks. And the quarterbacks are, we could get into over and over again. But this is a year that I will certainly be looking to take an elite quarterback, more so than other years.
I've always been a proponent of the elite quarterback. I've been a Josh Allen believer the last 2 years, and it has served me extremely well. I've gotten so many top 2 finishes in fantasy leagues with Josh Allen taken in the top of the third round, and I'm inclined to do it again. I mean, especially with these 4 guys at the top, it seems like you can't really go wrong with these 4 guys. I'm going to probably eat my words on that, and we'll talk about in a quarterback episode exactly how we're going to pick hairs about which one's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then no surprise, I'm a Josh Allen guy despite the Jets shirt. But It seems like elite quarterback's the way to go. And just to kind of wrap this up, because I think we're already at an hour because we like to yap, I think fantasy football leagues are going to be won in the third and fourth round this year. We didn't go into the fourth round. We're just kind of touching on the top to middle of the third round. But I'm looking at like 30 through 50, and it seems like there's just stud after stud after stud. And maybe like I need to go back and look at previous drafts and see if this was always the case. But like I'm licking my lips about some guys I can get in the third and fourth round.
No, I absolutely agree, and that's a really good point, because it seems like the breadth and depth of talent in fantasy football is getting greater.
Yeah.
And that's something that we have to consider going into drafts, because if you don't get one of those top 4 elite quarterbacks, it's like there's other guys that could still win you your league.
Yeah. You still get a Baker Mayfield. You still get a Joe Burrow. You still could take a shot on this little guy named Patrick Mahomes. Who could be good, I guess. Like,
I mean, maybe you throw a dart and just try it out with that guy.
Yeah,
like that.
I've heard he's decent. So
I think the Chiefs. That's my bold prediction of the year. The Chiefs are gonna have a bounce back year in a big way in fantasy. So
is it Rasheed or Xavier that you think is going to be the proponent behind that?
I think. Well, first off, we need to say how many games.
Mr. Georgia College wannabe wants to. How many games he's going to miss?
Apology letter for someone who clearly doesn't regret driving fast. So it's a goal for me. I'll only go 120 instead of 130 from now on. But it's a lot to say. I think the receivers would be great. Pacheco should have a little bit of a bounce back here. Mahomes and Kelsey are Mahomes. I don't see them having that year they had last year. I see Mahomes and Kelsey having like the worst of their dynasty years last year. I think Kelsey wants to finish on a high note, and he's really, really motivated to do that. There was already a preseason fight in the middle of camp, and like that's just one of those things where you get the juices flowing when you care a lot, and it will put the young guys in shape to say, we are here because we want to be one of one. And I think that's going to reflect in the way Kelsey plays, and I think Mahomes is going to do it. And if this is Kelsey's last year, he's going to play like it's his last year. He's going to put his body on the line, and he's going to say, "Don't save me for the playoffs." He's like, "Let's get the 1 seed, so we don't have to deal with the away AFC Championship again, and let's make sure we do this thing right."
Yeah, let's make sure we beat Josh Allen at home instead of beat Josh Allen on the road.
But I see no world where Mahomes has as bad as he is last year.
QB 12 is crazy for a guy of his caliber.
It really is. But this is all to say there's a lot of discussion to be had. We hope you guys are just as excited to go into this year as we are. I mean, we had another episode and a half planned to talk about by when it was all said and done. We only got through our first 3 points today. We still have to talk about off-season moves, team changes to know. We're going to get into more depth on the rookies and sophomores to watch going into the year, and the 2025 season outlook will just be rounded out with episodes on different tier discussions and breakout stars and sleepers and people that we think are going to kind of come back to their prime. So stick around. We're going to do our best week after week to sort of get you a better production value video by the end of the day. Got to give our man, Mr. Calzone here, the props for handling so many of the edits and things like that to bring you your best. But we're going to try to make a bigger presence on social media, get some clips out there, keep you guys engaged. And if you have any recommendations or have a recommendation for someone you might want to guest star on a show, please let us know. But we're so happy to be back with you guys for episode 1 of season 2 of the Gogertzone podcast.
Yes, thank you all for watching. Let's see how many. Let's maybe in the comments see how many. Make some guesses on how many episodes will actually make it through season 2.
That's a good one. That's a good one to do. Yeah. Well, thank you all for coming. We'll see you for episode 2.